Hello. Hi. I'm Stacey Wilson, senior editor at The Hollywood Reporter, just across the street. And without further ado, let me introduce Michael Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So before we get to House of Cards, which is wonderful, and that last episode is especially great, I'd love to know just sort of where the acting bug came from. You're from the East Coast, but grew up in the South. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. My research was correct.
Yes.
How did the artistry sort of come to you? Why were you attracted to it?
Well, it was actually a total fluke. I was studying political science in college, and I had a bunch of core classes one semester, and my advisor said, "This is too many. You're never going to be able to pull this off." And he said, "You need to take an elective, and you need to drop one of these classes." And I was like, "Okay." And I said, "Well, do you have any recommendations?" He was like, "I think you should take this theater class. I think it would be good for you." And it was like my third year, I think.
What school was this? Where were you studying?
Coastal Carolina College is now Coastal Carolina.
There's really an alum of Coastal Carolina College? Really? Oh,
you know? Yeah, all right. So it's in Myrtle Beach, and I was a runner, and I had got a scholarship for running, but then later got one for theater, and I quickly quit running.
Wow. A little bit easier on the knees.
Yeah, but it was just a couple weeks in, we had to do a scene, and the professor asked to see me after class, and she said, "How long you been acting?" I was like, "I've never done it before."
So you'd never done any in high school or anything?
No, never did anything.
Wow.
Yeah, I always thought it was kind of cool, but I just always thought it was, I guess because in my high school they did a lot of musicals. I'm not really a singer, so I was just like,
you realized you could act without having to sing.
Exactly.
And what was the first production you performed in?
It was a small one-act called Private Wars that I did. And then my first big role in college was I got to play Tom in The Glass Menagerie. And I just was so fortunate that I had these two amazing professors who wanted to give so badly. I was the first person to graduate from my school with a performing arts degree. They literally finished the program for me in my fifth year of college so that I could graduate with a performing arts degree. But I had these two professors who were just so passionate about it, and it's all they wanted to do was teach someone. And it would be me and like four other people who were like, "I'm just trying to get an A in something."
They're probably a track athlete or something. And then, did you have a sense immediately of, because a lot of your work, or most of your work that I've seen is dramatic, did you know that was more of your path as opposed to comedy?
Yeah, I'm just not funny, so it just worked
You're
out.
pretty funny.
No, it just sort of happened that way. People ask me now, like, what do you want to do next? And I think I would love to do a comedy because
You've done a lot of heavy stuff in the last few years. Right?
Always bad. And never get to smile.
That's true. I don't think we've ever seen you smile on the show. And so after college, did you move to New York and kind of slog it out there, theater work and stuff?
Yeah. Right after graduation, my theater professor, she had me audition for a regional children's theater, and I did, and I got the job, and it sounds a lot more glamorous than it was. We had a van, like a custom 80s van, and no, it had to have been 70s van because this was early 90s. So it was an old custom van, and the four of us, the prince, the princess, the bad guy, and the rock or the tree or whatever, and we would get into a van with our set, with our costumes, and perform to, much smaller than this with like 5-year-olds talking through the whole thing. And I did it but I was so excited, I was like, I got a job right out of college, and so
did you get to rotate which parts you played, or were you always the bad guy?
I was a prince. No,
oh, you were the prince. I didn't want to typecast.
No, because when I got the job, I was like, I just don't want to play a rock. I said I'm cool. I'm not playing a rock. So I did that for a semester. And then it was a winter semester, and they said, we want to make you captain, and that means you get to drive the van, and you sometimes you would get your own room on the road and stuff. It was a big promotion. And
it sounds like a Christopher Guest movie. This would be like
totally. It's exactly what it was like. And the people who ran it were just crazier than anything. Lovely people, but just it was a crazy organization. And so they asked me to be a captain, and I was like, no, I'm gonna go be an actor somewhere. And so I left South Carolina, and I went home to Atlanta to help a friend out with building for a little bit, and then I called my buddy, and he was like, dude, move to New York, and I did it.
They always make it sound so easy. Move to New York.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, actually, I do
easy.
have a good little quick story. My mom had a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend who was a producer in Hollywood, and she said, you can call this guy. I got this number for you. And so I called this guy, and I could picture this big giant man with a cigar behind a desk, because that's exactly what he sounded like. He's like, hey, kid. I was like, hey, he's like, so you want to be an actor? And I said, yes, sir. I said, I was just wondering if you had any advice. And he said, where do you live? And I said, I'm in Atlanta right now. And he said, okay, move to New York or L.A. And I said, okay. And there was a long pause, and I said, is that it? He's like, that's it, kid. You want to be an actor? Move to New York or L.A. And I said, all right. so then I called my buddy in New York, and he said, yeah, come on up. So I did it.
it's a good first step, at the very least. And how did you go about getting theater work while you were there? Did you just start auditioning? Did you go back to school? What was your approach?
Yeah, I did the, back then it was you would buy Backstage magazine when it came out every week at the newsstand, and you would, I see some people shaking their heads, yes, they remember, and you would submit a hard copy of your headshot and resume, and I would always handwrite my letters, and I just submitted for everything, every student film, anything, and I did crazy things, and no porn or anything like that, but I did just something like crazy. When I say low budget, I mean like low budget. And
Well, indie films were just becoming a very big deal at that time too.
Yeah, and you were just hoping to get in the one that was like what was the Brothers McMullen or whatever at the time. I never did, but I got a couple of decent ones. But it was just like that along, and then I went to the Actors Studio, the real house, not the new school, and I just volunteered there and just beat the pavement.
It sounded like you had some good mentors there.
Yeah, Arthur Penn was a big influence on my life, and he just really took me under his wing and helped me out there all the years I volunteered, and then he finally had me go and understudy a play that he was putting on. And I understudied, I think, 11 male roles, and someone from there. And then one of the men fell out of the play.
Oh, wow.
And the guy was like 70, and it was a sheriff's crony was the role. And I said, oh, I'm from the South. I could play this role, Arthur. And meanwhile, I'd memorized every male role in the play because I was understudying all the men. And so he's like, no, I'm going to have some of the old-timers from the studio come by and audition later after rehearsal day. And I said, okay. But I got to read it that day during rehearsal, and I got to read it in front of the writer and Arthur and the rest of the cast, and they were all cracking up, and it was a comedy. And the role was, the play wasn't, but the role was.
You're the comic relief.
And then and then afterwards, Arthur came up to me and said, everyone really liked that. That was great. And I said, thanks. And he said, we'll see how the old timers work out today. I said, all right. And then the next day, he's like, all right, you still have to stage manage, but you're in the play. And so I got the role. And
what was the play?
It was called Major Crimes. Jay Preston Allen wrote it, and I think it was one of her last plays. And it was the first time that the Actors Studio had put on a play at a new venue outside of their house. So it was a real treat. And then at the end of the play, I went up to Arthur afterwards, and I said, this has meant the world. I had already auditioned to become a member of the studio for 2 years in a row. And I just said, this meant the world to me to be with you and to learn from you every day like this. And he's like, I got a little secret for you. And I was like, what? And he's like, you're a member. And I was like, what? And he's like, you're a member. He's like, it's not official yet, but the paperwork's going through. You're a member. And I ran backstage, and I just started crying. I was like,
wow.
First I jumped up and down. I was like, oh my God. And then I just sat there, and I was like, I couldn't believe what had happened to me. And I just sat there and cried. It was like a really... one of those moments you'd never forget,
Wow. And at what point did you think that you wanted to segue to film? And was that purposeful, or did it just sort of happen as the roles sort of came to you?
Yeah, no, it was something I always wanted to do, because when I left college, I was like, well, this is what I got my degree in. This is what I want to make a living doing. And so, you know, I said to myself, I said, my goal is to make a comfortable living being an actor. And so I knew that I wasn't going to do that necessarily in theater, at least not as easily as I could in film and television. So I started doing commercials, and then that led to more film and television.
And what did you find the audition process to be like for you? Because it can be very brutal.
I never really, I mean, a couple times, like when, you know, you're going to go read for, like, you know, somebody really big or something, and you're just starting out. It was, I would get nervous, but I always did this funny thing. I'm in New York, and so you take the elevator up to the audition room, and I'd always put my grandmother and Vivica Linfords, who was a big influence of mine at the Actors Studio, and they were both had passed, and I'd be like, all right, guys, I'm gonna put one on each shoulder. I'd be like, come on, let's go. And I don't know, maybe that helped calm my nerves a little.
That's nice.
But that's how I got through it.
You're making this all seem too easy. These people are struggling out here. You have to
easy. It
give
was not
them hope.
easy for a second. No, I heard.
No, you seem to not have had a lot of the same angst that maybe a lot of people had, and maybe because you decided to act, sort of, it wasn't something you were sort of tortured by.
Yeah, no, I was very tortured, because I was in New York with student loans, and I wanted desperately to pay them off, and I worked so hard at restaurants and Bike Messenger and all these jobs to try and pay that off, and then still try to pursue acting full time. But the really, I think it was Bryan Cranston, I could be wrong, and maybe one of you guys know, but somebody recently said, and I'm pretty sure it was Bryan, he said that the main thing to keep in mind is, and I wish I'd heard this back then, but the main thing to keep in mind is when you go in that room, and I know this now, the director and the casting director want nothing more than for you to be the right person for that role.
Right.
They don't want to keep doing this audition process. They want to be done.
They're not having fun. No.
They're prepping a film, and they're doing a million things, and they're looking at, you know, costumes and locations. They want to say, oh my God, great, we're done. Okay, that role's done. Next. And they want that person to be that role. So keep that in mind, and know that they're pulling for you as much as you want it. They want you to have it.
That's very true. And casting directors have told me that too, that people think that they're dream killers, and they're not. No. They want you to succeed. Absolutely. And actually, when we spoke a few weeks ago, you had pointed to 2008 as being a milestone year for you, working with Clint Eastwood on The Changeling, and I'd love to know how you got that part.
That's a good story, actually. I was in Africa, and I was shooting Generation Kill, and it was like a 5-month HBO miniseries, and we shot in Africa from east to west of the southern half of Africa there. And I got to go home for like a week, and I hadn't seen my wife for, I don't even know how long it was at that point. And I went home, and I said to my manager, I was like, hey, look, I'm coming home, but no auditions. I just want to relax and be with my wife. And he's like,
you were living here at the time in LA?
I was living in New York.
Oh, New York.
New York. I've been in New York the whole time.
Okay.
And he said, okay, I respect that, no problem. You're on the move, the miniseries for another 3 months anyways. So I landed, you know, you're all out of whack because it's so far to fly. And then I woke up in the morning, and there's a voicemail from my manager. I called him, and I was like, hey man, what's up? And he was like, all right, I got an audition for you. And I was like, no. I said, this is ridiculous. No, I don't. And he's like, it's Clint Eastwood. And I was like, where am I going? and so yeah.
It's good when they don't listen to you. You know?
Totally. And then the funny thing though is I put myself. I went into see Ellen Chenoweth for that role. And
she's so awesome.
An amazing casting director. Talk about one who really pulls for the actor. She's an amazing woman. And I went in there, and she said, like halfway through the audition, she was like, stop, just stop. And I was like, what? She was like, it's totally wrong. And I was like, okay, well, what can I do to fix it? And she was like, well, I think you should go home and watch this movie. And maybe watch this one and this one. And they were period pieces. And And because the film took place in the 40s, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay, all right, I'll do that. And she was like, just come back. This was in the morning. And she was like, just come back at the end of the day. And I was like, all right. So I went to a park, and I sat there, and I was thinking, and I'm like, what is it? You know, what? And I realized the way that I talk as a person, I'm just like, I mumble everything. My wife's always like, I can never understand anything you're saying. And I said, it's about enunciation and posture. And these guys in the 40s, every word is
very crisp,
very clipped and crisp. And so I just went over the scenes over and over and over and over in my head. And then I started saying them out loud, looking like a crazy person like I do in New York a lot. And I went back. It was like 2 or 3 hours later, and she was like, hey. She's like, you ready? And I was like, yeah. And I did it, and she was like, that's it. What did you watch? I was like, I didn't. I said, but I figured that's what you meant. And she was like, great. So I went back to Africa, and she did the whole audition round. And then she said to Brian, my manager, was like, he's the choice, but until you can clear the dates, we're not going to present him to Clint. And meanwhile, I'm in Africa shooting, and I was like, I can't. What am I going to do? Go to the producer and be like, okay, so I think I'm going to get this offer, but you have to give me off 3 weeks sporadically over the next 3 months, and 3 or 4 weeks, whatever it was. And so I kind of I told my manager, I was like, okay, I'll go to them. And then I hemmed and hawed for like 2 days. I'm like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what I'm going to do. And my manager called me, and he said, okay, forget that. The tape went to Clint. You're his choice. You have to get the dates cleared. And I was like, okay, now I'll go to the producer. And I went to her, and she was this lovely, lovely producer from London. And she said, just so seriously, she's like, I can't have you miss that opportunity. And that was it. And Clint Eastwood's team and her team, they both moved schedules, and the ADs just talked for days, and they figured it out. And I flew back and forth, I think, 3 times from Africa to LA to shoot that movie. It was
very worth all the jet lag I'm sure you felt. What would you say you learned from that experience working with him? Because making films is such a completely different animal, especially working with Clint.
That you better be ready. That's what I learned working with Clint Eastwood. A friend of mine was a costume designer, and she said, who had worked with him before, and she said, bring your A game, because there's no time for anything else. And you know, you hear the stories about Clint Eastwood doing one take, and it's true. He really will do a scene in one take, and we did that a lot. And so I couldn't have been any more prepared. I was just I was so scared. Talk about being scared. I mean, I was well into my career at that point, and I was scared to death. Like, how my first day I had to learn how to drive a car that was this. Was it 20s or 40s?
It was the 40s.
40s, yeah.
If I remember.
Model A or Model T, and the gas pedal was this thing you used with your thumb on the steering wheel, and there were 3 pedals on the floor, and one of them wasn't a clutch, and it was like it was really crazy. And I was like, oh my God! And like my first day, I have to do a scene with this kid. I'm driving forward, reverse, and talking, and I was just like, oh my God, please, everybody up there, be with me today.
And I'm always curious, what is Clint's, I guess, sort of presence as a director, aside from the wanting to keep things short, take-wise? How much direction does he give you about what he wants from you, or is it all assumed that you know what he wants?
Yeah, no, I mean, I had a very clear idea of how I wanted to play the character going in, and I think he had a lot of faith in me. And this is a good one. He said to me one day, he goes, so it was this, I don't know, for those of you who saw it, there's a scene, and it's that we did in one take with a Steadicam. We covered 20 yards, and I had to pull up in the car, get out of the car, walk over to this chicken coop, walk around the chicken coop, through it. A chicken jumps out, scares me that there's a grip back there throwing a chicken at your face. It's like, and then the kid runs by, and I go running after him, and the Steadicam follows me to the house. And so Clint is explaining all that to me, and he's like, all right, so you're gonna walk up here, and you're gonna get to the chicken. He's like, oh hell, kid, you know what you're doing, let's go. And that was it. I was like, okay, where's the chicken gonna be? I was like, oh my God. So it was, yeah, that was, but that he has, he's one of those directors who believes casting, like David Fincher, the same thing he says, that the casting is the main ingredient. If you get casting right, then everything else is going to fall right into place.
It also makes their job so much easier when everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
And also, Clint, having been an actor, I'm sure that informs his minimalist approach, as it were. And speaking of Fincher, the reason we're here tonight, tell me how House of Cards came to you. There's such a sort of mythology about the show now, and Beau Willimon, and just sort of, how did you enter into this crazy world?
My first audition was, I'd heard about the project. My manager had told me about it, and I was like, oh my God, what a, the only uncertainty was funny enough, Netflix at the time was the only unknown.
This was the big experiment at the time. No one knew how this was going to work out. Yeah.
And so, but you have ingredients like David Fincher and Kevin Spacey and Robin Wright and Beau Willimon, and it was like, all right, I'll bet Netflix is doing something right. They got the right people, So, but I was very, very eager from the get-go to get on this show in some capacity, and I didn't care which. And my first audition was for Hammerschmidt, who was the guy who runs the newspaper. Right. I went to my agency. I put myself on tape with just one of the gals who works there reading opposite me, and we sent it in, and then they were like, yeah, okay, let's see him read Lucas. So I went back for Lucas. We think he's more Lucas. So Lucas is the one who hooks up with Zoe. If I'm giving any spoilers away now, I'm sorry, but it's a little late.
Spoilers don't exist with Netflix.
Exactly. So Lucas is the one who hooks up with Zoe, the young lover of hers who works at the paper as well. And so I was like, oh, cool. Okay. Kate Mara was also attached at the time. No, I didn't know they were going to hook up, but I was like, to get to work with Kate Mara every day, I was like, yeah. So I was like, great. And so I went in for Lucas. And then they were like, okay, but we think he's probably Russo. So
really? So you got in Russo.
So wow. I went, so then I went, and then I put myself on tape for Russo. And so then they said, okay, David Fincher wants to meet you and do a little callback with him and Lorraine Mayfield, the casting director, who I love this woman now. So I went back and I met with him, and it was like a 45-minute work session, and it was one of the greatest days of my life. And I'm reading Russo and Lucas, and Fincher's working these scenes over and over with me. And
is Beau there too at the time?
No, just the two of them. And they're saying, and they Beau though and Kevin were watching all the tapes all along. Okay. And so Fincher, all right, do it like this. And then he paced around the room while I'm doing it with Lorraine, and he's looking out a window, and he's like, do it like this. And I'd go around, and then he's like, great. So 45 minutes is over, and I'm just having the best time. I'm like getting to hang out with David Fincher and work, and he looks at me. He's like, that was great. I think you can play anybody. He's like, but I think I want you to read for another role. And I was like, I said, okay, all right, sure. And then
he said Claire.
And I
right?
did
No.
exactly. I said, I'll play the shit out of Claire. And I was like, okay. And he's like, and he just looked at me, and I was looking at him like I'm sitting there waiting for sides or something. He's like, well, not now. And I was like, no, it's fine. I got all day. And he's like, no, just go home. And he's like, you'll put it on tape. I'll watch it. And I'm just thinking to myself, no. I have you in the room.
You don't know the other characters that are left, because you don't know Doug exists at this point, right? You're just reading.
I didn't. I'm thinking to myself, who?
Who
I
else
read
is
it, but it was so long ago because literally Hammerschmidt audition was weeks ago, and when I had read the original script, and Stamper wasn't really big in the pilot, and then so then Julie Schubert, Lorraine's assistant, they go back to L.A., Lorraine and Fincher. And Julie let me go see her on a Saturday in New York City in her casting office, and she helped me put it on tape. And then I went to New Orleans to do Now You See Me, and they said they want to test you. And I was like, okay. And he's like, they want to do it Friday. And I was like, uh-oh. I was like, I'm in New Orleans and I'm working, and I'm like, no. And he's like, it's okay, they're just going to show the tapes, and Fincher's comfortable with that. And I'm just thinking, no, please, no, I want this so badly. And that was my test. The other people went there, and they just showed my tape, and then my manager called me in New Orleans. It was a while later, and again, I cried. I'm kind of a crier, though. But
We like that. We like emotional.
I'm not afraid to admit it either. But my manager called me. He was like, and we're really tight. My manager and I. He's one of the greatest guys in the business. And he called me and he said, hey, no, he goes, hey, Doug, what's up? I was like, no, dude, it's Michael. And I had always known Stamper as Stamper. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I said, no, it's Michael. And he was like, oh, I'm sorry, I was looking for Doug. And I was like, B, it's Michael. And he's like, oh, shit, sorry, dude, I called Doug Stamper. And I was like, shut up. I was like, oh, my God. Oh, my God. And I was like, I'll never forget where I was standing, the window I was looking at, exactly what I was seeing. Like, I'll never, ever forget that moment. It was like just one of those moments, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Doug is really hard character, not only to make appealing, because he's so mysterious. So I'm wondering, what did the casting director who helped you with your tape, what kind of advice did she give you to make him magnetic? Because he's still, like, I still don't get him. He's still like,
okay,
however many episodes later, he's still extremely mysterious to me.
Yeah, he's so complicated, and all I had to go on was the scenes in the first episode, and I just chose to play him. The way that I do a lot of things is I take a lot of information. It takes me forever to memorize, so I go over this stuff a million times. I think it's one of my biggest faults because it's harder on me, but at the same time I think it's better because the 20th, 30th time I go over something, I'm like, oh, that's what that means. You know, so there's no shortcuts for me. So what also happens with that is I take all this information in, going over it so many times, and I just kind of bury it all and then sort of just say it. So that's sort of my approach, and I think she just helped guide me through some key moments of the scene that I might not have seen.
And at that point, I know you have since done research in D.C. and probably met a lot of people who have those types of jobs. At the time, did you have a point of reference for this kind of guy and, you know, how he acted with the congressman? And
not at the time of the audition,
okay.
No. Since then, I've obviously met with them. Well, now, since then, several.
You probably met like
staffs,
real Dougs, and you're afraid of how realistic you portray them.
Go to the correspondence dinner weekends, and everyone's like, I know a guy just like you. I'm like, no, you don't, please.
That's sad.
No, it's scary. But I do think Just Shy of Murder that we are a somewhat accurate portrayal of just how devious things can be.
And very similar to Hollywood in a lot of ways, too.
Yeah, very unfortunately so.
And obviously, everyone would love to ask you about the most recent season, and if you're in season 3 and all these things. What do you know about Doug's future, if anything?
I don't.
Okay.
It's getting information out of Beau Willimon is
Beau is
like
entrenched in a room somewhere, cranking out season 3.
Yeah,
okay.
and you know the thing is they own me. You know they can say whenever they want within. I think they have at least another. I don't know. It's a good bit left on my contract before they can actually say no or yes. You know, so I'm waiting by the phone.
We're hoping.
I say that because I mean I've been very fortunate that the show has brought me incredible other opportunities, really incredible opportunities. But I say it because it's honestly the best job I've ever had, not because of the success or what the show's become, but because it's so rare that you get writing that's that good on a television show.
Very
it's
smart.
So literally, like I remember talking to Beau when I was in New Orleans, right after I got the job. He called me and he said, we talked for a while, and he's like, okay, so here's what I have to say about Doug. He's like, this season I want everyone to just be like, what the fuck is up with this guy? He's like, excuse my language, I apologize if I offended anyone. He's like, but that's what he's saying. He's like, I want everyone to just be like, what is up with this guy? Like, what is his deal? And he's like, and just don't emote. He's like, that's it. Don't emote and make everyone wonder what's underneath. And I was like, okay, cool. He's like, second season, we'll get into it, and we'll let people know a little bit more about you. But
and then you asked, can I cry at least once?
And then I just cried.
And so how are you spending your time sort of while you wait to find out?
I've been keeping busy. I was just traveling all over from Nepal to London doing a film called Everest. It was really an incredible adventure, and I was away from my family for 3 months. I saw him for 2 weeks in the middle in Rome. And so now I'm home, and it's very easy. I have 2 little kids, 2 and a 5-year-old, so.
And still in New York.
My time is full. and it's
You're
great.
Okay
And I'm okay taking a little break, and it feels really nice to have done what I've done in the last year, to literally as an actor say, you know what, I can take a break. I don't have to freak out about the next thing,
right?
Because I've spent my whole life doing it.
And then you forget to enjoy the moment.
Every job I get, yeah, and that's why I'm so thankful for every job I get, and so thankful every time that someone hires me, and I just go home. I'm like, oh my God, I pulled the wool over their eyes. They bought it.
But I think every actor feels that. I mean, every actor I've ever spoken to about this stuff, I mean, maybe some of them are full of it, but I think a lot of them genuinely, because you spend so much time struggling, that when you get it. Actually, Tony Hale, was just speaking to him last week about this, and he said that you guys are very different, do very different work, but he said when he got arrested, he could not enjoy being on the show the first time because he was so worried about what he was going to do afterwards. Yeah. And this is something he'd been waiting his whole life to get. So it's good if you can stop yourself and
it's so true. It's so true, and it's so hard. Even now, like I say these things, I'm not worried about it, but I do. You do in the back of your mind. That's always there, like, because I've been in the business long enough where I've seen friends shoot to the top, and then have a stall or go through a couple rough years and then bounce back. But those rough years as an actor, okay, you make a lot of money, but you give a lot of it away to your team, and
right.
And then you have a family and you're living in New York and you're just like, oh my God, I thought I was making good money, and you're just like, I need another job now, and
it's scary.
It really does. It's, and they're not paying like they used to. That's the other big thing, People are getting away with paying a lot less to actors, and it's hard, and it's hard for other people to understand that, because they're like, you made how much a week, but yeah, well, I worked 4 weeks that year, so I made that much that year. It's really all relative,
Well, and 10% goes to Brian, and 10% goes to your agent, and
30% before taxes. Business manager, attorney, agent, manager, 10, 5, 5.
Wow.
And then you pay taxes.
So you need a good superhero franchise.
Exactly.
You mentioned earlier you had been to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and you were hanging out with the Scandal people, and I know the Veep people were there too, which the idea that all these people are there and this should be like not what this is about, but that's a different subject. What was it like to be there and walk?
Totally. I so agree with you.
No, it is. It's so disturbing to me how we celebrate. Oh, it's like a Hollywood party. It's like, I don't think.
That's exactly what it's
not.
Not
my place to editorialize, but what was it like to be there and be surrounded by all these people who I'm sure were just like falling over themselves to tell you how much they love the show? And
well, I mean, obviously that is always it's a very nice feeling, Especially you work all these years and somebody's like, oh, I liked you in that movie that you were in. They don't know you are, But people are like screaming Stamper and stuff at these parties, and the DC world goes crazy for the show. So it was a real treat, and I got to meet Valerie Jarrett, and it was just hanging out with Chris Matthews. I mean, I was like, this is awesome. Michael Kelly, ah! And I was like, oh my God.
He does like to yell. He does like to yell.
Yelled across the New York Observer party, like across a room, Michael Kelly.
Wow.
Ah!
There are worse people to shout your name at a party, that's for sure.
Of all.
You spoke earlier about sort of advice you would maybe give people about, how to stick through it. Is there something specific you wish you'd known, either about the business, you talk about working with your team, that can be very daunting for people, or maybe just about auditioning, or something you would tell them as they're sort of going through this themselves?
Yeah, I think the auditioning I touched on a good bit is knowing that they want you. to be the person. The one thing that I learned early on, just because I was working when I was like 12 years old. I literally started a job when I was 12, not child labor or anything, but I was doing a neighbor's yard, but I had a very good work ethic. My father was a former Marine, and he had a good work ethic, and he passed that along to me. And the thing that I always did right from the get-go, and I can't stress enough, is to respect your crew. Like, they're there longer than you are, and they're there before you, they're there after you, and they work way harder than you do. So, and in respecting your crew, to have that relationship with them, it especially on a television series, it's so helpful because you need them so much, man. And you need, sometimes it's just as a friend to be like, oh my God, this day is 14 hours already and we're still going. You don't see the end in sight. They're buddies and they're friends and they're working their ass off. So I think that's a big thing is from stage managers in theater to the costumer to anyone on a film set. It's a big thing to carry with you.
And they can also hook you up with an extra take or something and pretend the camera malfunctioned if you feel like you need to go again.
A little soft on that. Exactly. A little soft, Jim? Soft.
You won't tell Fincher, though. You had to go again. Although he does love his
you don't have to worry about
telling. Yeah, that's true.
Asking Fincher for another take.
How many takes, what's the record number of takes he's asked you to do?
It's funny. I should know the exact number, but it was well over 50.
Oh, my God. Do you remember what scene?
Yeah, vividly.
I imagine you remember what scene.
and I remember it because it was one of my first days with Fincher, and he said we were about 19 takes in, and he had thrown me. He's like, still rolling. Hey, Michael, and this one just when you pick up the newspaper, do it with your right hand, and then when you open it, I want you to kind of show like that. Okay? All right, here we go. We're still rolling. And then the next take. So close your eyes on this part and say this line like that. And so every take he's throwing a different note out there, and I'm just like, take 19. I'm like, holy shit. What did he say on 15? I was like, I can't remember all this anymore. And like take 20, he was like, Michael, breathe. What are you doing? And I was like, I'm sorry, I need a second, And he's like, still rolling. And I'm like, oh my God. So I get through it, and I don't know, it was 50-something takes.
Is this in the pilot?
It's in, no, I remember the scene. It was when I bring him the news. No, it was the I think it was a Peachoid episode because I bring him the newspaper. No, it was the drug dealer, the drug dude in the trailer.
In season 1.
Season one, yeah. And I have to show him the newspaper print that I had fabricated basically about this guy. I think that's what it was. And so I go to Fincher at lunch, and I said, he's sitting by himself, and I said, boss, can I talk to you for a second? And lunch was right after this marathon take. And he's like, yeah, sit down, kid. So I sit down, and I was like, hey, look, I kind of pride myself on being able to breathe and get through things. And I said, but I just couldn't remember all of the notes that you were giving me. And I was trying to remember everything, and I just couldn't keep it all in. And he was like, oh, no, man, it's a big pot. I'm just throwing ingredients in. If something sticks, use it. And I was like, oh, all right. Well, it's good to know that's how you work now, David. I really appreciate that. We had a good laugh, and he was like, no, man, I thought you knew that. I'm sorry, yeah.
I don't think he really tells people that in advance on purpose. So we have a couple questions from the audience. The first being, somebody did not write who it's from. It's anonymous, but I know, it's nothing titillating. Did or do you have mentors? Acting mentors, and do you yourself mentor less experienced actors?
Yes and yes. Someone who I have mentoring that they've actually given me information. Like I have looked up to my entire career. Ed Harris. He's someone who I just.
Oh yeah, the best.
I hope to meet him one day. He's somebody I think the world of, and he's such a talent, and he just picks the greatest projects, and he's just so.
He's never been bad.
No,
just ever.
So
like you just think
cool,
about
man.
it. I can't remember even a
and he's
single
never
stinker
in the
movie
press,
he's
and he's never, he's just
Yeah.
a great guy who does a great job always. So he's someone I really look up to. Kevin Spacey was someone who I really, really looked up to, and he's very giving and always mentoring younger people and
especially
helping out.
theater with his Vic.
Yeah, the old Vic,
yeah.
and he's a very giving person. And yeah, I do have young people who I help out. I'll go and have a beer with and talk to from time to time, and just sometimes it's really helpful to talk, just to talk about stuff, and because it's hard. It's the hardest. It's a very personal
hardest
struggle. Gig in the
struggle.
world. Yeah, and it gets really personal because your feelings get really hurt and the things we go through. So yeah, I try to be there for as many young people as I can because, for me, I had a friend who's a working actor, a successful working actor, and he was a guy who I have always been able to call, and I still do. I have a decision to make on do I do this or do I that or just anything. Have you ever worked with this? Just a great person to call, and we talk a lot. So I feel blessed to have that, and so I try to give back as well.
That's great. A question from Zachary. He asks, what is the greatest lesson you've learned from this work environment, House of Cards specifically, and how has it enhanced your craft?
The greatest lesson from House of Cards. I guess even though I had done episodic before, it's really that it's the marathon that it is. You really have to prepare yourself for, and ours isn't that long, it's 5-6 months, but your typical film is 2-3, so you're going twice the distance, and you've got to give 100% every day. So it's pacing yourself and keeping your instrument going. Going to the gym. I try to. I try to run before I work every day, because I think it's really helpful to open you up. I'm not a real good stretcher, and I don't do any of the and all those things. I always felt like such a goofball doing it. So I'm like, I got to do something though. So I run, and I do feel like it really. I feel a difference when I do it those days, and it's that kind of thing that you do for an extended period of time. But honestly, with that show, it's just those words are so. I mean, it's just, I feel every script I'm like, oh my God, I get to say that. Like it's just, so there's not even the working. I asked to change one thing, one monologue, one word of dialogue the whole 2 years. I asked to change one thing.
What was it?
It was that big AA speech, the fuck the zero, in the first season. Yeah, the first season. And I saw Bo the night before. We have dinner most nights at the James Joyce Pub in Baltimore, and we were having dinner, and I said, so I don't know how to say this, but something's not jiving, something's not right with the with the monologue. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, I don't know, it's just not everything else I've ever said on the show. There's never been one, something's just not right. I know it, but something's not clicking. He was like, okay, I'll look at when I get home. And he's like, come to work, hour early. And I was like, all right. So I go to work 2 hours early. And I was like, and he's like, here you go. And he hands me pages, and it was completely, there's some points still in it, but it was like a 2-page monologue. And I told you about how bad I am at memorizing, and I was like, so I read the whole thing, and I was like, oh my God. And he's like, what do you think? I was like, it's awesome. he's like, great, right? And I was like, yeah, how am I going to memorize it? And he's like, you'll get it. We'll start on their coverage, and then we'll come back to you. And I was like, okay. And funny enough, when the pressure was taken off of me, because if I went up on my lines that day, well, then it was their fault, because they just rewrote it and handed it to me. Somehow, my memorization skills probably a lot mental, because I did learn it rather quickly, and it was a pretty long little piece there. So, yeah, I guess just working with, like touching on that there, like working with, that it's not you performing in this, you're all creating something together, and That's the beautiful thing about that show and any good project really, is that you're all creating this piece of art. Everybody there, you know.
And we're generally, for seasons 1 and 2, were all the scripts written before you started shooting?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a
Oh,
luxury.
no, all of them. Not the whole season wasn't
Not the
done.
whole season.
I think a large portion of the first season was, but the second season,
Okay.
no.
'Cause I was gonna say, yeah, that would help.
They have it mapped, you know, and they have them loosely written. But last season, like, I mean, they can't because of the way that they work. You know, Rachel Brosnahan, who plays the prostitute so brilliantly, she was going to be in the pilot and get him arrested. And I think it was the scene where I put the money in her mouth and I said, "You're going to help me screw this guy over." And they liked the way we worked together. And they're like, Bo was like, "I like this. I'm gonna write something else." And so she came on. Excuse me. She came on as a guest star. Maybe one episode, but maybe one scene in one and one scene in the next. But that was it. That was her role. And
wow.
They just kept writing. So there has to be room for that in our show, because Bo doesn't write it and say, "Okay, well there it is. That's the show."
Right.
He has a very good understanding of what it is, and then just goes off on these tangents from there.
The happy accidents that come about.
And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of characters on our show that were not supposed to be staying as long as they did.
But it was always in the cards for Russo to go in season 1. That was always
when he was going to go and exactly what episode. That was all. How he went and the path he took to get there changed.
Right.
But yeah, like totally changed.
Because it was a very elaborate storyline.
Yeah, and he wasn't going to be running for governor. It was just a whole different thing. But things went that way. And the same for Kate. When she signed on for the show, she signed on for the first season and the first episode of the second season.
Wow.
That was
what
it.
an episode
Sorry
that was.
if I just spoiled somebody.
No, she's on assignment in Europe. No, she's coming back. Probably just time for one more question from John. He asks, this is a very good question, do you find it easy not to judge your character, or do your personal politics ever interfere with your job requirements on the show?
Yeah, they do actually. It's funny. You can't help but to. I don't. What happens is I don't really judge Doug. I actually understand Doug because I have to understand Doug. If that makes sense. I don't mean that in like some weird kooky actory way. I'm just saying like, it's you have to understand where this guy's coming from, or doesn't. You have to make it real inside yourself to make it real on screen. So for me, I'm like, okay. So the way I went about that was I said, all right, well, to explain the actions of this man, okay, yes, he's an alcoholic, recovered alcoholic. Like many recovering alcoholics that I know, what happens is they take all that energy that they use to get trashed and they funnel into one thing. You'll see a lot of recovering alcoholics get jacked. They just go to the gym nonstop. You see some of them become very Christian. You see some of them, you know, they all choose something, and not all. I'm not going to say everybody, but it's a very common thing with alcoholics. So for me, I just said, it's all about work. And he wants to do the best job he can possibly do, and he's willing to do it at all costs. So for him, it's not this, oh, what does Francis have over him that so many people say to me. It's not that. It's like, no, I'm just doing the job the best I can. And if I have to step on people to do it, then I'll do it. And the same goes with just playing John Krakauer. You know, everyone had a different understanding of their character because everyone wrote a different book about this expedition in '96 on Everest. And I'm like, yeah, but mine's right. Like, you know, like, but everyone thought that, and it was a big problem with the film. And it was so funny because the director finally was like, okay, what book? I don't give a shit. I'm making a movie about all of these books. And this is what happened. This is the story I'm telling. If you're telling me your character did something different in his book, well, that's your background research for your character. This is the movie we're making. So it's easy to get lost or tied up in that. Sorry, I went on a little long. I obviously went on a little long on a lot of things. If we only had time for 3 questions, I apologize.
I know. I wish we could go further, but thank you everyone for coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.